Hey there! Welcome to the Queen Bee Sessions, conversations with Wisconsin women in conservation. We tell stories about all the good work being done to protect soil, water, and wildlife by our fair state's women landowners, farmers, farm workers, gardeners, prairie stewards, woodland guardians, urban growers, and conservation professionals. We hope these stories encourage you in your own efforts to nurture land and yourself. We are the Wisconsin Women in Conservation Project, otherwise known as WiWiC, and I'm your host, Chris Marion, a mom and grandma grazing sheep in the driftless region. My land is sandy and my chickens are sassy. Like you, I'm always learning better ways to keep my soil and myself healthy and productive. I love to learn by visiting with like-minded women, those queen bees slaying every day for the earth and our communities. I'm sure glad you're here.
Sweet.
Well, today it is my great delight to be here with Laura Fredrickson Gosewisch. Did I do that right?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I was nervous and I got it. Laura is awesome. She is the founder of Vital Ground Farm, and she is a market manager at the West Side St. Paul Market, and she's a grower, a market vegetable grower herself. She's also, you're a clinical massage therapist, right, Laura? Is that sounds like something a little bit special?
Yes, I went to some extra schooling. There's one school in Chicago that has an extended program that's in partnership with what used to be the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, but has a new name. And they were really focused on injury recovery, the way that massage can support medical care in surgeries, injuries. There was some athletic stuff that they highlighted too that it was started by some Canadians that in Canada, massage therapy is more of a medical profession, maybe on par with how we treat chiropractors here. They're alternative, but still covered by insurance and a little bit more taken seriously. So they thought, well, if America had the kind of training that we have in Canada, maybe this could be a more serious industry here too. And so I was just really lucky to be living in Chicago at the time and interested in getting trained. And when I was interested in massage, I thought that I would be doing more of a clinical application of it, but life doesn't always go like you think it will. You just kind of go down the path and you find your way along the way. So I'm really grateful that I got the more thorough training because I think I bring a lot of value to the work that I've been doing. And, it's been 12 years since I started and I still love it. A lot of massage therapists burn out pretty fast. But I think that, I just think that my training had something to do with that too. I'm really grateful to that.
Wow, I'm glad you bring that up because I think some of our conversation today will circle back around to burnout. I think it's something on a lot of farmers' minds,
Yes.
especially as we inventory last year and we're setting up our systems for this year. I think preventing burnout is something we're all wanting to talk about. But back to introducing you. I had the great pleasure of meeting you in my neighborhood. I am here on my farm in Southwest Wisconsin, in Lafayette County, and I met you in Greene County outside of Monroe, where you were doing like a body care workshop at a Soil Sisters field day. And that was my first encounter with you. And you were in these adorable overalls and just a sassy, fun person who brought all of these tools to show us how to better take care of our body while we were doing the hard work of farming. That was just an amazing presentation. Then I got to encounter you in person again at the Emerging Farmers Retreat in up in Minnesota this past winter, where I got on the chair and you straightened me out, girl.
Well, I'm so glad.
That was so wonderful. It was so wonderful. You were set up with all this equipment in the middle of I think it was like a community center, and all of these farmers from all over Minnesota were there, and you were helping them out when they had time to come into the room. But it turns out you yourself are also a farmer. And you currently rent land. You've been renting land in Wisconsin and Minnesota for 7 years. I want us to be able to talk about that today too. And I'm just so thankful that you are in my life and that you're also in the circle of Wisconsin Women in Conservation. You will be doing a workshop. You're our first winter wellness webinar teacher, and we're going to visit with you this coming week on Thursday. I believe that's January 25th from noon to 1. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the Queen Bee Sessions. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am just delighted to be chatting with you. I remember you. You're a memorable person, and I remember you from being in Argyle, and the connectivity of all the farm communities here is really why I got to be there, and I feel so grateful to have the connections that things like the Wisconsin Women in Conservation and the Soil Sisters foster, because it's through connecting with each other that we get these cool relationships that help support us. And I just was so delighted to be invited out to that event and then meeting you. You took one of my favorite pictures of myself now, and you even promised you'd get a good shot of me. You're like, I'm going to get a good shot of you. And I treasure that picture so much that everything just kind of built on itself, and we do it together. So I'm just excited to be part of this with you today. And next week, I'm so excited about next week. I'm feeling honored that, so many people are interested, that we're going to have a really good lunch hour together, I think.
Yeah, we have 107 signed up so far, and I believe there will be quite a few more before we turn that Zoom on.
Oh my goodness.
For our lunchtime webinar on Thursday. Well, I'm so glad you brought up the connection idea. I have been poking around on your website, which is beautiful. It's vitalgroundfarm.com. I'm looking at it right now. You have beautiful photos, some beautiful drawings, watercolor paintings, and you talk a lot about connection and how relationships are so important in the soil and in farming, and also in our bodies and in our community. And so I think you yourself really embody connection, and I'm excited for you to bring that understanding to us. But I'm really curious, like, what is your origin story? How did you get involved with land work? How did you get involved with body work? What shaped your philosophy, I guess? You can go way back if you want, but I would love to hear, like, you've got this really, I would say, developed philosophy around the title of our webinar, which is Nurturing What's Around Us and Within Us. And I'd love to hear, like, where that all came from.
Gosh, it's been a long journey, and I will go way back because I was pondering the question, and my first introduction to conservation was my grandmother. My mom's mom was really obsessed with our state flower, the lady slipper, and it's endangered, and she had just spent her life committed to conservation of that flower and monarch butterflies. And I am an only child, so summers I would hang out with my grandparents for a few weeks, and we would be digging for worms to go fishing, and I would walk in her gardens with her, and she just was so passionate about the natural world that it kind of became my best friend as a kid. I was kind of being an only child, a little lonely sometimes. I loved my alone time, but nature was my refuge for sure as a kid and into adulthood, where when I lived in Chicago, I had come off of an experience of kind of having the rug pulled out from under me as an 18-year-old. I was thinking that I wanted to go into ministry, and then I came out as queer, and my whole world kind of crumbled. The school that I was at didn't want me there anymore, and I was really young and had kind of been conditioned to believe that I was supposed to just figure it out. And so I spent some time living in my car. I didn't really know how to ask for help. And, you know, privilege comes in moments like that because sleeping in my car in bar parking lots was something that I would do frequently. And I never got harassed or approached by the police because I was a young white woman sleeping in the parking lot, assumably just, doing the responsible thing and sleeping
Right.
it off before going home. And I made those choices because I thought, well, that's my story. If anybody knocks on my window, and I was able to spend, you know, it seems silly. I was able to spend months sleeping in my car without any trouble. Um,
Wow.
and, that's kind of where white privilege comes up for me, that, we do have hardships, of course, and sometimes it could have been much worse. And that I really try to acknowledge that in the work that I do, because our sense of dignity, our sense of self is so wrapped up in the experiences that we have in life. And, you know, if I think back, I know that I would have had support had I known to reach out and ask and be vulnerable in this way that said, I'm kind of lost and really scared and I don't know what to do. But something about the way I was raised in the world was, you just figure it out. You just got to suck it up and do what you got to do and make it work, because it's hard on all of us and nobody's going to give you any handouts. So that was kind of a tough way to start my adulthood. And I think it's cultivated a really deep sense of compassion in me, that you just never, ever know what someone has had to go through to get to wherever they are. And it took me many, many years to get on my feet. And moving to Chicago was part of that, because I was in a relationship with someone that was from there. And so we moved to their childhood home, and thought we could build this beautiful life for ourselves in Chicago. And that city is pretty brutal and very expensive. And I learned a lot of hard lessons there, and really, really, really struggled to make ends meet, working multiple jobs, living in an apartment that was definitely not ideal. The heating system was just non-existent practically. I remember days where I was just so cold and so hungry. I had no idea how it was going to go on, but I had to get to work. And, I was grateful to have a job and grateful for the things that were working out for me,
Yeah.
and just trying to do my best. And it really felt during those times that nobody really cared if I was going to make it or not. My family cared about me, but I had experiences at the grocery store where I couldn't afford what was being rung up, and I had to put things back, and it wasn't even that much stuff. And the people around me were just looking away, and nobody seemed to notice that, this person's really having a rough time. And um, I got really desperate one day, and I was at the dollar store and there were seeds on sale because it was spring. And I just thought, I'm just going to grow some food. If I can't afford this, I'm just going to grow some. Like, a salad at the store would have been a lot of money. And I saw this little seed packet of lettuce and I thought, shoot, I mean, I can't, what am I going to do with this $5? I'll just buy some stuff. And I repurposed some weird containers, and I had a grill that I was really proud of that I turned into a planter. And then a metal scrapper came and took my grill, and I was so mad. It was just like the weirdest kind of experience. But I look back at pictures of this garden that I made in the patio of my apartment in Chicago, and it's pathetic to look at, but it gave me so much hope that I grew a little something, and it was free in a way. And I started to feel this nurturing from the earth that I could work with, that said, it just felt like being a kid again and being connected with nature and feeling like there is something that I can do and I'm going to do it.
My God.
And that's it's kind of emotional for me to think about, because I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about all of that. And, um, you know, I fast forward to when I was, beginning farming, that trauma kind of lived in me with my work too. And that I did have this sort of sense of like, well, if this isn't going to save me, nothing will. And I have to just keep going and going and going. And this is my survival strategy. So I can't stop. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about helping other people get present to themselves in that way where they can say, I might be pushing myself out of a denial of my needs because of all of the pressures of capitalism and just life that push us beyond our capacity. And in farming, we are pushing ourselves beyond our capacity repeatedly. And then we go back the next day and we do it again. And it just has to happen to a point. But at what point do we then come home to ourselves and say, what do I need to feel better after this hard day? How do I get through this? And that's been, I guess, the statement that has been with me all my life is, how do I get through this? And just figuring out whatever's accessible at the time to help me get a little further along the path.
My gosh, I like to take down quotes when I'm doing podcast interviews so I can like put a quote on the, like on Spotify. I can't keep up with you.
I'm sorry.
Your quotes are you're so quotable.
Oh,
and
goodness.
so wise. I mean, first of all, never ever have I experienced a farm origin story that started in the dollar store with dollar store seeds. But when you were telling that story, I mean, all of us, farming is so mythological, right? It's a mythological profession. It's so laden with tropes and dreams and um, inspiration, right? It's barely practical, right?
Yeah.
And to have you describe that in such really, well, first of all, it's concrete based. You're in a city, you're growing dollar store seeds on your patio, and you're talking about this as a connection to the earth. I mean, that just wouldn't connect for so many people. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about this beautiful watercolor on your website that says ground. Did you paint that, or did somebody else paint that, or where's that from? It's so cute.
Thanks. I doodled it on a napkin at my first farm job when I was just watching the farm for my boss one night.
Oh my God.
And I just held on to it and I thought, this is also connected and we're so connected to the earth. And there was a young artist in my neighborhood that had, posted something that said, hey, I'm looking for some work. Do you have any commissions for me? And I thought, gosh, I've always dreamt of having this as a real piece of art by a real artist. And, so I commissioned it maybe 5 years ago and I've just treasured it ever since. And
well, it's such a beautiful, charming, and you have to really like study it to pull out the words. But so it's complicated, right? And there's something that, and all the things are connected, which so embodies your whole life's work. But also it's like, it's just so hopeful and welcoming. And I've just never quite heard anyone describe their connection to earth and to food in such a way. It's really amazing. But also you mentioned privilege in the early start part of your story, which is so moving. But I think for so many of us, we grew up in the suburbs, or we grew up in the country, and we grew up where we took our connection to earth as a right, as a birthright. Some of that is inherited land, even if it's not a lot. We do have an actual given connection to land, but a lot of people don't grow up that way. Certainly worldwide, like soil isn't part of their birthright. And to talk about developing that connection from dollar store seeds and patio growing, that's just amazing. I feel like clearly there's such a strong calling in you to like, you felt drawn to cultivate that connection, and it was a matter of survival. And I think that's true. That's probably true for every one of us. We just aren't in touch with it. And that's what's so amazing about your work, is you inviting people to get in touch with themselves, but also that connection to the land and to food. That's amazing. I've never heard an origin story quite like that. My God.
Oh, well, thanks. That makes me feel real nice because, it's a weird one. And that's kind of, you're right that farming is such a mythological thing that, I came at it with a lot of those kind of dreamy ideas too, a lot of reality too, but it feels really inaccessible. And being someone who had no experience in farming, entering the world of farming was a little tough. That I luckily had some really welcoming women to shepherd me along and help teach me, and that I'm really grateful for that. But you're right, there's a gatekeeping there that's like, you can't really do this, but you can. And I try to bring that to, being at the farmers market is one of my favorite places to be, because, I love to talk to people about their gardens and how much better a tomato tastes from your own yard, and that you could also turn that into a career if you wanted, and that it's not as inaccessible as you think.
So, can you tell me about this network of women and how you got your start in growing? I think one of the stories that we don't hear enough about is small scale renters who are growing food on rented land, and what that's like. And yeah, tell me how you got started.
Yeah, that is what reinforces my relationship centricness. That I went to the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Dreams Workshop, which I feel is such a valuable thing to be in existence. And I still, remember the teacher, Dory Eder, who's now across the pond, I think. And she had such an approachable, caring way about her. And just the message of the Farm Dreams Workshop is like, so you think you want to farm? Okay, let's play with that a little bit and see what that does. And I walked away with, I actually ran into a friend at that workshop who had been in my friend group in middle school. And we said, what are you doing here? And so we both are still farming. She's on a homestead with her 2 kids and husband. And now we chat once in a while to just kind of get connected. She's a personal trainer, so she's also really passionate about body health and farming. And so it's been fun to have that initial connection point, and then we both just went our separate ways. But I walked away with this message of, get on a farm and see if this is really what you want to do. And so I just went home and I told my roommate, and I was so jazzed up about it that she said, I think I have a friend who has a cousin with a farm. Let me reach out to her. And she did. And then I called her up and I just left a voicemail. We still joke about it because she was my first boss. She was farming alone in Prescott and needed help, and said, I'm not really set up to mentor you, but I can show you what I know if you'll help me out. And I said, let's do it. So I did that part-time. I think I started in the middle of summer in 2015. So our first project was, pulling weeds that were taller than we were, because it was so hard for her to manage everything all by herself. And that was my first kind of job on the farm. And I thought, I love this. This is great. Let's do this again tomorrow. So I just kept coming back, and we worked well together. So she hired me full time the next year, and I left my job and never looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. So where have your different gardens, farms, fields, plots, where
Yeah.
have you been? You said Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Yes, it's been a patchwork, and it's so fun how I really would love to write down just the progression of how I reached each place, because it's been a lot of different places. I
Yeah.
started in Prescott. I grew with her for the year and pretty much just, worked with her on her farm. I got one little field to grow some things and get my get my feet wet, understand what was going on, understand how hard it is to manage all the things, even in one small plot. And so then I rented from her the following year because she ended up not farming full time anymore because of the reality that it is a hard living. And for her to pay me the small amount she was paying me really was a hardship on her profitability, and that she just had to really make a choice about what kind of a lifestyle she wanted, and that she was going to go, work in farm support agencies and education to help still advance organic agriculture without being in it. So I rented from her when she went to work, and then I went to a plot in Hudson. There was kind of a community garden area that my mom and I would go to and grow. That was where I would grow home food and was kind of practicing because I couldn't sell what I was growing in the community garden. So I would grow for sale at her land, and then I would just kind of be practicing and exploring crops. I talk about like the relationship with plants that, when you spend enough seasons with a tomato plant, you kind of know what it's doing, and you see leaves curling and you're like, I remember this happened once before, and you kind of get a sense of things. So I just want to develop my relationship with the plants and grow stuff that I didn't know if I could sell. And so I experimented with herbs and just would invite people out. I love having people come just visit the garden or harvest or work with me, even especially kids. They're so fun to have around vegetable plants. And um, so that was kind of my entertaining garden, and it made it real pretty. And, the community garden has its own set of, dramas and personalities. And, it was an interesting experience. I did the community garden for 2 years, and then that was in Hudson and Prescott. And then I met someone at a farmer's market that used to live in the community that our farmer's market is, but she was living in Beldenville. And so we got to be friends, and I farmed with her in Beldenville. And another person from the west side owned land in El Paso, which is just a few minutes from Beldenville. And so he and I partnered up and did a bunch of farming on his land because he was a commuting farmer. He was growing, he would call, trees and bees. He had honey and a bunch of trees and berries. And so we had a very small vegetable plot, but it was kind of in a valley where I was like, we could probably grow salad all summer long here because nothing else is thriving that needs warm weather. It's just low and by the river. And so we just worked together, and they were all just people that I met along the way that was kind of like, hey, you're really cool, let's work together. And then, hey, you're really cool, let's work together. So then one winter I was delivering for UPS as a helper, and I was delivering to a flower shop, and the guy with the flower shop had a farm up in Malacca. So he invited me up to Malacca to farm with him there. And, that was through my just winter gigging out. And then that was only one season's worth of work. I had a really hard summer personally that year. And so we ended up just parting ways, and I think it was for the best. So that has kind of been just this rolling evolution of being different places a lot, which can be sad, but also I've kind of made a mantra of, the earth needs us wherever it is. And it doesn't matter if it's mine or not. I want to be with it, and I will nourish it. And when it's time for me to go, it's not, there was sort of a weird sense of ownership that was like, well, if I'm putting all these inputs in and I'm putting in all this labor, like this isn't mine. And I kind of had to let go of that as a renter, that I want all of the earth to thrive. So why does it have to be mine? And
Right. Wow. So interesting. I mean, obviously, the indigenous perspective on land is that you don't own it, you work with it.
exactly.
Um,
Yes.
but it's so American to have that idea that, well, I'm investing all these inputs. And of course, like if you're growing, you got to invest in the soil. There's no way to grow successfully without doing that. But like the perspective that you can give wherever you're at, and the earth needs you wherever it's at. That's so different. Um, certainly not worldwide, right? That is not different from a worldwide perspective, but really interesting. And again, like for you, the relationships are coming in so strong. The relationships are leading you from one patch of soil to another. That's really also different from a lot of people's paths. I think a lot of farmers actually struggle with the isolation of farming. Um, and we now know that there's kind of a mental health crisis in the countryside because of the lack of connection. Um, and yet your story has a lot more to do with connection to people than maybe a lot of people's stories. Tell me about uh farmers markets. How many different markets have you sold in? You're you're in the unique position of having been a grower and a manager. Um, tell me about your love for markets.
Yeah. So I have sold at a few different markets. Some of them are no longer open. You know, one of my favorites was in Afton, Minnesota, and they no longer have their farmers market, but the West Side Farmers Market, where I manage now, was one of the first ones that it is the first one I signed up for. The other markets I worked with my boss there and then moved on to, selling there myself too sometimes. But the West Side Farmers Market was one where I said, if you're going to be in Wisconsin on Saturday morning, why don't I go to the Twin Cities on Saturday morning and I'll sign up for a market and we can have double the market, action and hopefully make more money. And so it was just the market that I could afford. And in the Twin Cities, it's pretty expensive to get into a farmer's market.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
so I signed up for it because it was affordable and the community there. It's a really small market. It's in a neighborhood that's a little bit isolated from the rest of St. Paul. And so they have this real sense of community there. And it's in a little parking lot of an ice cream shop. It just feels like what people imagine farmers markets to be.
Yes.
It's not the big lot downtown that's
Right.
full of vendors. It's like you got 12 vendors here. And the people who come walked here with their kids. And it's just the most lovely thing. And so I felt a kinship with the market because of the way that it helped me develop my business. The people
Mhm.
were responsive and they would be honest with me. And, they'd be like, kohlrabi, I don't know what that is. And
Right.
I don't want to buy that. And I'd be like, well, here's a little one, like, here, just try it. Or, that I started making little info sheets and I would, um, one of the products that one of my farming partners and I came up with was pickling garlic scapes because so many people were just like, what do I do with these garlic scapes? I'm not going to buy them if I don't know what to do with them.
Right.
And so I kind of was noticing how that education piece on the consumer side that, we're trained by the way that we shop for food normally, not at the farmer's market. And so this farmer's market experience is kind of a place to educate people and help them understand the food a little more. So I got really into that. And that's when, I noticed that other farmers I would talk to are like, oh my goodness, I hate the farmer's market. I don't want to be there. So I then was kind of like, let me bring some of your stuff and let me promote what you're doing. And we could kind of both share the fact that I love the market. And if I could be there all day, I would be. And so I just love connecting with people over food and that our market being as small as it was really struggled during COVID.
Yeah.
And the community relied so heavily on the market that we couldn't bear to close. We pulled out everything we could to keep the market going. And by 2023, the people who had worked so hard to get us through just really burned out.
Mm.
And we were, kind of faced with closing the market. And I was the president of our board at the time. And I just thought, I don't I don't want this to happen. I just cannot let this happen. And so I I put my farm on hold last summer and I managed, I know, thumbs up. But I basically told the board, I said, well, if we don't have a market, I can't farm because this is the market I want to sell at. So I don't mind, taking the year off. The land that I had worked with someone on wasn't going to work out for me anyway. And it was another relationship decision. Like if I was going to put the way I feel aside, I could probably have done it, but it was not a good relationship for me. So I had to choose myself. And so I had this opening in my life where I thought, I am kind of trying to figure out what to do. And you do need someone to manage this. And I've been here for 6 years setting up my tent every week. I probably could do it. And, looking back, that was a naive thing to say because it is such a huge job to manage a market, to attract customers, to attract vendors. But we were in such a state of uh, just desperation at the time that we were able to make some really cool principled actions that I stood up for some of the things like the fact that farmers are really struggling to know whether or not we're going to make it financially, and that signing up for another market, we were hearing from customers, well, you don't have enough produce vendors. Where are all the produce vendors? And we've opened up our application and didn't get a lot of applications from produce vendors. And we thought, we're not sure where they are. And I had been at a bunch of conferences over the winter where we all kind of talked about how scared we were of the next season and that we weren't really sure that we could meet the CSA demands, meet the market demands, and that we were all kind of contracting in this way to survive and say, I know that I can do this and that's all I'll do. So signing up for a new market wasn't on anybody's mind.
Yeah.
So I said, if we said that produce stands are free, what might happen?
Yeah.
And it worked out. We got enough produce vendors to kind of be a viable farmers market for the summer. And still, two had to quit because of life pressure. They had things happen, health issues that, we started with 4 and we ended with kind of 1.5. But, the ability to do that felt like a real gift, that I had the insight to the farming world enough, and I had enough power as the president of the board to say, like, people write grants about the principled actions that they're taking. We don't look for funding and then choose our activities based on who's going to pay us.
Right.
We are part of this community and we can add to this community. And if we decide that we're going to make a stand, we might attract that interest because everybody's kind of scrambling to know what to do about all the varied problems that they're seeing in the world. And I really do believe that local food and just bringing it in a little bit economy wise, the local economy can really help us feel more empowered, help us make a real difference, and help us all survive. So let's just lean into that and see if anybody shows up. And they really did. Like, our community just kind of restored my faith this year. And we got just enough donations to not go under. And that was all we needed. It was okay. I'm hopeful that next year we'll have more ability to be part of our farmers market world, because we're just kind of a little sweet little market doing our best. But
Well, I share your love for tiny markets. I started a market in this town of 800. And when we started, I was the produce grower and there were a couple others, and we had some bakers, and then we had some flowers, and then we had some crafts. And I think what people don't realize when they're driving through town and they see a market is how much love and sweat and tears and getting up early and making the hard decisions about do we advertise this week or not, and all of there's so much that goes into this wonderful experience that people really value, but it is there's a lot of work behind that charm. And I think it is so important to invest in that community piece, because we can't take it for granted. I mean, you just can't take for granted that there's going to be local farmers growing local food for you. I think we've been in a little bit of an expansion time. I think in COVID, people were like, oh my gosh, I need to buy locally and I need to know the source of my food. And I think it's going to be interesting to see like where we end up in the next decade. Um, there's so many great investments that have come down through ARPA funds and other kind of special one-time spending moments that invested in local economies post-COVID. And I think, it's going to be up to all of us to keep those things going. So thank you for growing and managing the market. It's a big deal. But in addition to having been a part of a market, I don't grow for sale anymore, but now I have a farm stay. And one of the main things that people talk about loving is that we have a market in town that they can walk to on a Saturday, and that it's small and they can chat with everybody. And there's a couple dogs around, and it's just like it's so much charm, but there's so much work behind that
There
charm.
is, yeah. And you're competing with this kind of capitalist imagery of, what a story looks like and what's going on. During 2020, I got to be in one of the big downtown markets in Minneapolis, and I was so excited, and I paid so much money to be there. And I barely made what I make at the little market. It was such a different experience. And, I want everybody to be at every farmer's market. It doesn't matter if you're there just to sip coffee and talk with your friends, or if you're there to really get your groceries, but it felt different. And it taught me a lot about like what goes into the heart of a market, because just having a steady stream of lots of customers still isn't quite enough to really support the vendors and help us like thrive, and not just be able to say, I was at this big market, check me out, aren't I cool? And, for a while I kind of had that feeling. And then I was like, this is actually my least favorite market. I'm sorry. Yeah. But
well, you're such a great person to be facilitating a conversation about self-care and about nurturing, because you get the work that goes into growing, and you get the work that goes into selling, and you get the work that goes into managing a market. I mean, you kind of get this culture of farming from so many different angles. How did you start exploring this part of your I guess portfolio, this part of what you offer? What's your origin story for the facilitation work?
I was so obsessed with being accepted by the farming community. I really wanted to disappear my massage history into just becoming a farmer. And when I would talk to people about where I came from, they would say, oh my gosh, I've had this hip problem that's bothering me. Do you think you could help me out? Like, do you have any tips? And at first I kind of rejected this need of, the fact that I know how it is to be farming, and that when I was with my boss, we'd be talking about how like, man, my legs are sore. And I was like, maybe we should just squat differently this time and just move around, or do, incorporate a little bit of silliness. Helps me a lot to just be a little silly and be like, okay, we're just gonna squat this way, and then we're gonna squat that way. And then in 100 feet, we've squatted like 4 different ways. And so our body's not as tired of this as it would be.
Right.
And that it was, again, kind of just me trying to get through the fact that I'm doing this really hard work, but I understand anatomy enough to say, and repetitive stress injury was something I got trained really thoroughly on. And I'm like, this is what we're dealing with, is the repetitive motions and the lack of recovery time, and that we're just continuing to pile on these loads. And then the culture that I'm noticing around me in farming is that we just go and we'll sleep when we're dead. And there isn't much conversation about like, man, I'm really going to take a nice bubble bath tonight. Like, that was not what we were talking about. And so I got over some of my resistance and said, I think I could actually really help people. And during learning to farm, there was kind of this period where I thought like, I don't know anything. I can't do anything right. I'm just terrible at this. What have I done? And at that time, my boss was really struggling physically. And I said, could I just give you a massage once in a while? Like, I think it would really help you. And it made a huge difference for her. And that kind of was the light bulb for me that was like, this farming community needs more support around how this can work for us. Because in my massage training, we got this messaging that was like, you're going to be lucky if you can work on a cruise ship or work for some high powered executives. Like, that's what we're going for. You want to work at a spa. And the demographic of rural people and farmers
Right.
were not an ideal demographic for us to look for.
Right.
And so I remembered that and I thought, gosh, the bodywork community has this untapped potential too, that we could be doing so much more for people who work really hard and deserve this support.
Yeah.
So then I got a little obsessive about figuring out who's doing this and where can I find the resources and who's the expert out here. And there aren't a lot, I say I can count on one hand the professionals that are available to support specifically farmers with their physical health. And, Cynthia Flores is doing labor movement in Maine, and she has since 2020 been doing some really amazing online and in person, beautiful body support things. And there weren't really a lot of people in the Midwest.
Mm.
And I thought, well, I started by writing proposals to farming conferences. And I would just say, I actually didn't know when I wrote my first proposal that it was me offering to do the class. I was just like, hey, here's an idea. Maybe you want to think about wellness. And so
Yeah.
then I got an email later where they were like, so this is a little outside of what we would normally do. So we're not really sure about it, but we've gotten a couple of proposals about health. So maybe we'll just lump you all together and give you a talk and you guys can figure out how to make that work. And that was in 2018. That was kind of the initial open door, that half open door that I needed to kind of say, I guess no one else really is talking about this. I'll try. And so that also kind of built on itself because the woman that I presented with was really wonderful and we connected professionally. And, I spoke at one of her conferences, and then the reviews from our talk were so effusive that said, please give us more of this, that then they invited me back in 2019 and I spoke again about it. And then 2020 happened and, I figured I probably wasn't going to do speaking at conferences because it also felt like fitting this really large, complex thing into a
Yeah.
very small box.
Right.
And that was when the Emerging Farmers Conference, one of their organizers had been at my talk in 2019 and remembered me and said, would you please come talk at the Emerging Farmers Conference? And I was really honest with her. I said, I just don't feel like this talk scenario is serving people in the way that I want to. Like, I'd really like, because a room full of farmers could be a lot of different activities. We've got,
Right.
livestock, we've got tractors or no tractors. Some people do everything by hand. We've got, vegetables and all these different things to do,
Right.
that it was really hard to give a helpful message beyond be aware of your body,
Right.
understand what you're doing, work for some symmetry. Like I've kind of digested like user's guide to the body thing that I'll do. That's like just focus on these few things and you'll be able to take good care of yourself. And then pay attention to what you're actually doing and that this job is your job. Taking care of your body is for you to do. And that we've kind of given some of that responsibility to medical professionals
Right.
or, that our engagement with our own health journey isn't always an empowered one.
Right.
And that I really want like people to understand how much work it takes just to pay attention to yourself. And that
Right.
starting there is a great place to start because then you're not turning off the signals that are telling you this hurts, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, those kind of basic needs that we need to attend to just to keep ourselves functional.
Right. Well, I
So
love sorry, I
Oh,
interrupted.
you're good. No.
I'm looking up what your description was for the webinar that's coming up. And you said you are the most vital component of your life. Sustainability is about regeneration, allowing nature to replenish what we take. Life requires resources from our body that must be replenished too. And I don't think farmers think about that much ever. I mean, we're in the world of conservation farming, sustainable ag. And so we think a lot about, okay, we're growing this crop. Now we're going to need to give this back. This cover crop is going to address this deficiency. We've got this following it. We're adding amendments. But like, I don't think we're as tuned into what our bodies need. And I love that you say, just as depleted soil will not produce healthy crops, we don't do our best work when we are burned out. I think it's so condensing. Like, I think the primary challenge of farming is that it is overwhelming. And we just talked about all these different scenarios where we're not sure if we're going to make it and what's the best way to market things, and that on the edgeness, where there's not a lot of margin money wise, there's for sure not margin body wise or
Yes.
mental health wise. And so how do you help people get at that?
It's a big job. We do kind of exist as an invisible tool on our farms that the tasks need doing, but we are kind of the given in the scenario. And some of my favorite books are books about people that are dealing with big health issues. There's one that I just got for Christmas that I'm loving called The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. And
I saw that.
Oh my goodness, it's so lovely. I'm just starting it, but it's kind of one of those things where this person is forced to be in her body all the time because of an illness. And that the way that it slows you down when your body will not cooperate. And I've lived with managing chronic pain since I was a kid, and I know how debilitating it is when your body just will not cooperate with what you want to do. And, people with livestock know that sometimes you really have a good reason that you want this animal to do this thing, and it just won't do it. And that our body is kind of that same wildness of nature that we're kind of in partnership with. We can't force our bodies to do exactly what we need them to do all the time. They can go a long time with us treating them that way, but something's got to give at some point. And a lot of times we don't deal with the reality of needing that tending all along until it's just a hard stop. And that can completely ruin someone's life. And especially farmers, I don't want us to lose anymore. I just think we need these folks that are especially caring about regeneration and sustainability, that we do a lot more physical stuff when we are trying to be good stewards of the earth, that we might use less machinery, we might just have more tasks to do because we are incorporating cover crops, and like whole plantings are being added, or multiple plantings to a season that some people don't do at all.
Right.
And so if we can't be sustainably managing ourselves, that our farms are dependent on us, and that we can't treat ourselves in a way that's, as though we're disposable.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so wise. I you said we kind of exist as an invisible tool on our farms. That's just 100% true. I really love that. I mean, just a reminder that like you are it. As women in particular, we do want to go above and beyond to take care of the soil and the earth. I'm not saying that guys don't, but we do have this, like, I think a little bit more visceral caretaking response. And it's easy to put ourselves on the back burner until we're burning out. And
Yes.
yeah, what like what 3 things, if you could tell a caretaker of the earth three three important things to remember about taking care of themselves, what would they be?
I appreciate that question so much. I want to put some thought into it. I feel like I have so many things running through my head because, as much as you love nature, you are also nature.
Mm,
And your body's messages of pain, hunger, the nervous system is this biological system, much like the systems we work with to farm, that are sending and receiving messages about survival.
mhm.
And the way that we interact with our bodies is sending a message that, when I worked in a retail setting, I was proud of the fact that I couldn't even tell when I was hungry or needed to go to the bathroom. I was just off while I was on the clock. And
Right, right,
then I would catch up once I
right.
was home. And learning to tune in to your body is a big task, but I think it's the foundational task to develop that, hearing the messages. And sometimes it takes time and quiet and kind of peaceful. You might have to work really hard at hearing your body, but
Yeah,
that feels like the first skill that I would say, please work on cultivating, hearing what you need. And then, it's hard enough to then do something about it once we hear it. And that's why we tune it out, because we don't want to be frustrated by the fact that, like, actually, I'm noticing that at 11 a.m., I'm hungry and I'm out in the field. And that's when I get really grumpy and I
mhm.
get kind of pissy about everything I have to do because lunch is still an hour away.
Right.
But noticing that might lead me to stick a granola bar in my pocket so
Mhm.
I have something to just keep me going for another hour so that I can make the stop that I've planned. And that you don't know those things until you can hear them from your body. And that,
Right.
just learning how to hear that seems like a really important thing. Um, and that an extension of that, is that your nervous system is pretty simplistic, that we can't really yell at ourselves to relax and actually relax. We have to treat it almost like a feral cat that we're trying to get into a box where it's like, you're afraid of me and you're freaking out. And if I'm like, I'm safe, stop running, they're not going to come to us. They're just not. It's like you sit there and you wait and you embody this piece that maybe they'll be drawn into you. And that um our nervous system is kind of our messaging in a very base level of, am I safe? Am I going to be
Yeah.
okay? So, and um, it shuts down systems to survive. So if it never feels safe, it's just not going to go into that parasympathetic response where we're actually digesting our food. And then,
Mm.
that compounds on itself where, well, my stomach hurts and I have ulcers and I feel terrible all the time. So there's no hope for me. And that
Right.
just quieting down whatever's really screaming at you.
Mm.
Um, Feeling good is good enough, I'd say. That
Mm.
just helping yourself feel a little bit better um, is actually a worthy task. It's not just, being avoidant or being lazy, where if you really need to somehow feel better right now, it's not a waste of time.
Yeah. That's hard to hear and to do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we're pushed through kind of people if we're in the profession of
Yes. And
farming.
And that is a beautiful thing. I love,
Right.
what I love about the way Cynthia Flores does her labor movement is that she talks about it as like athletes in overalls is kind of her tagline. And I love
Yeah.
that because uh, that's what athletes do too. And we don't
Right.
really blame them for then spending thousands of dollars on their ice baths and their personal trainers and all that
Right.
stuff. That, you perform at a high level, you kind of have to check out of your body because you need to perform at that high level.
Right.
Under circumstances that aren't ideal. It's hot, it's bright, things aren't going, it's not comfortable to farm. And we just can't give up and say, it's just not comfortable to farm. As long as I'm farming, I'm just going to feel like crap. That there's got to be a release valve somewhere, and it's different for everybody. Some people hate taking baths, some people love taking baths, some people really want to jump into a frozen lake, and other people would rather be in a sauna.
Right,
And
right.
that's another way that if you hear your body and you know what you like and you can notice what feels good, then it's just easier and faster and more efficient to get yourself back to feeling good again. And that we shouldn't have to resign ourselves to being miserable.
Right. So job one is knowing what our body is saying and what we like. And job two is giving ourselves some of it.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Well, I'm gonna take a bath tonight.
Oh, good.
I'm
Oh,
you've convinced me. Thank you very
yay.
much.
Well, gosh, I'm honored that you would listen to me, because that's the other thing is I'm out here saying all this stuff, and we can give ourselves a million reasons why that doesn't apply to me, or I don't need to do that, or
Right.
it's a mental game too that I think you asked for three things and I gave you two, and I'm kind of just struggling with the
They
third
were
one,
good.
I guess.
We're good. I didn't need
Honestly, I can think of something that is, again, just like so simple that, just drink water.
Hmm.
It's so simple. It's so basic, and it really, like, it helps everything work better. Just add more water. If you're sad, if you're mad, if you're frustrated, have a drink of water, please.
Wow, I love that. I do think we become overwhelmed with our feeling of overwhelm.
Totally.
And you just almost don't know where to start. And so I do think you have a really nurturing message that is also like, keep it simple too, which is wonderful. Well, so we're only going to have an hour with you on Thursday, which is sad. Our webinar is just an hour, but I do think people are coming, ready to start the new year. I mean, I think we've already made our resolutions and failed.
I know 20 days into
At
January
this
is
point
like
in
the
January.
window of failure where we wonder why we thought we would do something at all. But
Right.
maybe some of us are still going strong, and that's great. But
But I
I,
think we're blessed to be able to be talking to you in January and to maybe set ourselves up for some more realistic approaches to taking care of ourselves. So thank you so much for being willing to share your knowledge with the WiWiC family. Uh, and even though you're in Minnesota, you're given to us over here in
I just,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's a big part of my farming journey, that the land to rent a lot is over there in Wisconsin, which I appreciate a lot. And you have these beautiful networks that really are so supportive that I kind of wish I did live in Wisconsin. Sometimes I'm a Minnesotan, so I don't wish it too much, but
Yeah, you're
I do
loving
think you
this.
could.
Do you guys have snow? Do you have we have like 18 inches at my place right now. How are
Wow.
you guys doing with the snow?
I don't have a ton of snow. I'm in the Twin Cities usually in the winter, so there's not a lot of snow, but boy, is it cold. I had an exploded beverage in my car this morning, and I thought,
Oh,
I know better. And we get busy, we just get distracted. That's part of why I'm here all the time talking about this, because I need support. I need reminding. I need help. It's hard to be nice to yourself. It's just hard. So I still was like mad at myself for not knowing. I knew I just was distracted. I was busy. My hands were full. I didn't bring my drink in that I was really looking forward to.
right.
And now it's dead. But what are
Oh,
you going to do? Self-compassion, man. That's the only way forward.
totally.
Ugh.
Well, I'm so looking forward to Thursday. And I know that you're going to share a lot of things with us, but if you could give us a couple of resources that we could follow up on. You mentioned two things that popped out to me. One was the Land Stewardship Project. And interestingly, another podcast guest, Lauren Langworthy, she talked about her whole farm planning experience with, I think it was the Land Stewardship Project, and how
Yeah.
she and her partner yearly try and revisit that plan so that they go into the year realistic about what they can achieve, and they don't overreach in a way that could lead to burnout. And
Totally.
so Land Stewardship Project, now that's two people who've mentioned that. And then Cynthia Flores, the labor movement work.
Yes.
Are there any other resources that if people had some time this winter before the craziness starts? Of course, you might be starting
It's
on.
kind of already crazy sometimes, I know. I have the privilege of being the admin for the growing wellness group on the Ag Solidarity Network. That is an online free social media for farmers that, social media is kind of only as vibrant as the people participating on it. And I would love to just see more people on there talking about this stuff because we have a group for it. And we have, I post resources a lot. And, the Midwest vegetable growers have another set of resources that, MVeg, and if we're in Wisconsin, that's the Midwest. And so, they have a resource that I'll be linking on the Ag Solidarity Network. I really want to put all the pieces together so it's easy for us to find and access all these things that we need, because over the years, things have been created and they're just kind of few and far between in ways that if you're not obsessively searching for them, they're a little bit hard to find. So I'm really trying hard on the Ag Solidarity Network for the resource page for growing wellness to have everything that's out there.
All right, let's break that down. Make it really
Yeah.
clear. How do people find the Ag Solidarity Network? Is it just a Facebook page? Is it a website?
It's its own website. So
Okay.
I think it's agsolidaritynetwork.com. Yep, agsolidaritynetwork.com.
Okay.
And then it's free to join. You just fill out a little thing. And with your information, you can add a picture if you want. And
Okay.
um,
And then there's a growing wellness section in there.
there's a bunch of groups inside for all the different things you might be interested in. And then we can talk about just specific topics in the groups. So there is a wellness group that trying to get people to talk to me. It's mostly just me posting questions and, resources. And it's, I'd love to have more people on there chatting it up.
Okay, well, let's get over there, sisters, and and chat with our friend Laura. And then MVeg. How do people to connect to the Midwest? What is the
Midwest vegetable growers? Yeah, MVeg is kind of how I think about it too. So I'm going to be posting on our resource page in the Ag Solidarity Network their farmer resiliency and health. They've been building a resource document too that has links and things. I'm part of that working group with them.
That's a lot of work going into this area. It feels like that's maybe kind of new.
I think there's been new kind of shreds of funding that have come out that I think the Farm Labor Dashboard is another one. University of Vermont has that. And they have another page. Yeah, Farm Labor Dashboard. I think it's also just that page. And I got to do a retreat with them okay, so that is uvm.edu and then ag labor. I could send you the link if you want.
Yeah, we can put that in like the description. That would be great.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're doing a retreat. We know that we're going to have an event with you online on the 25th of January, but it sounds like you're available to do some work with other groups, other conferences. How do people reach out to you if they want to have you facilitate something with their group?
Yeah. Well, my farm website, vitalgroundfarm.com, is a good place. I also have because it's hard to explain my intersection of farming and massage and everything that I do have a website called considerlaura.com that you can reach me and also see some of the history of the wellness rooms and talks that I've done in the past. And if you are going to the Marble Seed Conference in La Crosse at the end of February, I am going to be putting a wellness room together for them. So you could come visit me at that wellness room and get a bunch of the resources and things that I put together for that.
I can't get the thumb to come up, but
come on, thumb.
2 thumbs up for that, because that's amazing. Definitely, I will see you on Thursday, but I will see you in the wellness room at the Marble Seed Conference as well. That's really exciting. I'm so glad that our paths crossed. I'm so grateful that you're working with Wisconsin Women in Conservation. And I'm so glad that you are here in the world reminding us to listen to our bodies.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that people want to hear what I've got to say.
Thank you for joining the conversation. The Queen Bee Sessions are brought to you by Wisconsin Women in Conservation, or WiWiC, a collaborative effort between the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute, Wisconsin Farmers Union, Renewing the Countryside, and Marble Seed. This project is funded by the United States Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service to connect women landowners and farmers with conservation education, technical assistance, and cost-share funding. For more information about events, programs, local potlucks, and mentorship opportunities, visit wiwic.org and sign up for The Buzz, a monthly e-newsletter. All WiWiC assistance is free of charge.